The words are found in the start of the book of Jeremiah, Old Testament prophet. If you have your Bibles, I invite you to turn along. Jeremiah, the first chapter, beginning with the 4th verse. The word of the Lord came to me saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. Ah, sovereign Lord, I said, I do not know how to speak. I'm only a child. But the Lord said to me, do not say I'm only a child. You must go to everyone I send you to and say whatever I command you. Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you and will rescue you, declares the Lord. Well, this really is a very special day, a day I take special joy in and special glory. I looked on my calendar. Today is Grandparents' Day. Thank you. Oh, and by the way, I'm also aware of something else. That today is a day for me where words run out to express the special gratitude I feel that just is welling up in me. And I will try to find words to say to you. The words of God to Jeremiah. Another translation reads, before I shaped you in the womb, I knew all about you. Before you saw the light of day, I had holy plans for you. Last year when I was on sabbatical, met up with my spiritual director in Colorado for the first time. He did something, he asked me something I've never done before. He said, I want you to tell me the story of your life in 5-year increments, birth to 5, 6 to 10, at different times. And as old as I am, it took forever to do that. But nevertheless, when it was all done a couple of days later, he said to me something that has haunted me at times, has challenged me at other times. It always continues to stir in me a holy curiosity. He said, Bill, God's been chasing you since you were 5 years old. Maybe that's something what Frederick Buechner meant when he said life is not just a journey through time, it is a sacred journey. 10 years ago, a little more, God chased me right out of High Point, North Carolina. Ordinary weeknight, I thought an ordinary phone call, I answer it. And on the other end is a Mr. Doug Leary, chair of the search committee of the Wake Forest Baptist Church in Wake Forest, North Carolina. Quite frankly, I'd already been given some advance notice that that call might be coming. So I said to Doug, as honestly as I knew how, I said, Doug, appreciate the call, but I'm really not interested in moving right now. My daughter is about to be a senior in high school. The church is doing better than ever. But I would be curious to hear your church's story. And so we did what you do. We met, we shared stories, we prayed. And eventually that day came with God's leading and a lot of prayers and a real struggle, because how do you say goodbye to people that you love so much? But to my utter surprise, the day came when my story and your story became one. And together now for 10 years, we've been writing new chapters together. There are many ways that God calls. The same sun looks different at every sunrise. And the call of God is as unique and different as every person who responds to it. Jeremiah, his name literally means God calls. Or even more precisely, God throws down. And if after 36 years of ministry, there is anything I could say, it would be this. I did not choose it as much as it chose me. And I've had that sense some days of being thrown down. A long time ago, I realized my life was never completely mine. I belonged to you, but I also belong to God. You may smirk, as some people would. Oh, you hear voices. You have a call. Trust me, this is not a career you enter into because you see a need. I've had a lot of bad haircuts, but I've never had a need to be a barber. I've eaten a lot of bad meals and never wanted to go to culinary school. No, something different happened to me. It selected me rather than I selecting it. You might say, what a narcissistic, arrogant kind of statement, that you're some kind of special. No, let me clarify. Jeremiah needed the word he spoke more than anybody that he spoke it to. He was a loner. I never would have guessed, nor would you, how lonely ministry some days can be. Go back, read the book. He was a depressed man. He was rejected. He was misunderstood. Jeremiah, just as much Bill Slater, needs that word more than anyone that it is spoken to. I've spent 10 years of my life and more, some days feeling like a bread truck driver who needed to stop and go back and eat some of the bread myself. I've spent 10 years like a delivery driver for water who wanted sometimes just stop and go back and drink some of my own goods. It seems far more likely to me that maybe, just maybe, God calls some of us because he knows that he needs to keep a closer eye on us. And he knows that of all people, that if we are not forced to face the word almost weekly, that we would be the quickest ones to probably go by the way. My second Sunday here all those years ago, I quoted Paul. I said, we have this treasure in earthen vessels. I wanted to make sure you knew what kind of crackpot you had just hired. And I've given for 10 years all kind of evidence of the brokenness in my life. And for 10 years, you have given all kind of evidence that a church that depends on pastoral authority will always be the weakest church imaginable. These 10 years, I have been the one who have leaned on you and learned from you. It's been your leadership and your wisdom and your imaginations and your daring, daunting willingness to dream to be more of a church that has allowed this church to be a church where not only do we dream dreams, but in fact they can and do come true. If anything, I felt like the flea who hitchhiked a ride on the elephant. The elephant went across this old bridge and it just rattled, and on the other side the flea said, man, we really made that thing shake, didn't we? What a great ride it has been. And I have leaned on you. And you have carried me far more than I have carried you. Leave it to the history books to draw their conclusions about these past 10 years. Any minister, including this one, always struggles with feelings of failure in a world where on any given Sunday, at least half of the membership is nowhere to be found. In America today, 17% of Americans are in church on any given Sunday, and the numbers are declining by the week. But yet, somehow we still believe that seeds that are being planted right now are yet to know some harvest that we cannot see. But this I know, the history of these past 10 years, best understood, are his story. They are a story ultimately about what God has done and what you all have been the participants and the vessels of allowing God's will to be done. Just think real quick with me, if you will. Go down memory lane. In these 10 years, first 2 years I was here, over 100 people joined each year, and we rapidly had to go to 2 worship services. We've had 2 capital campaigns, each bringing in pledges of over $2 million, while all the while your giving has gone from a budget of $602,000 to over $1.1 million. We broke ground on a second campus and dedicated a beautiful pavilion and athletic fields that are now being used by people all over this community. One that I celebrate uniquely is that not only have we enlarged the staff here, but we have expanded it qualitatively. We have such an incredible group of ministers on our staff right now. They are the A team. I know something about ministry. I've been doing it a long time. For me, it is such a unique honor, amazing privilege to come into a place and see people like Joanne and Rob and Sarah and Bryant. I think of Gandhi. I didn't say this in the first service. I always think of Gandhi. He always said, "There go my people. I have to run and catch up. I'm their leader." That's the way I so often feel in this church, and especially with this ministerial staff, how wonderful they are. Maybe more important to me than anything, and what I celebrate the most, is the huge quantum leap of mission activity this church has known. I remember with the start of the hot dog ministry, and now we serve literally tens of thousands of hot dogs every week. The Interfaith Food Shuttle, where we feed the hungry every month. The Community Connections Garden, where we now have over 7,500 pounds of produce in just 2 years going to the hungry. The ongoing relationship with Uganda, the trips to Haiti and to the Bahamas, the regular yearly annual youth trips, the trips to New York City. I could go on and on. As long as our church is about being beyond the walls, we will be okay around here. Because when we give our life away, that's when we gain life. And then how special it is for me and all of us on this unique day to walk over to see everybody finding new Sunday school classrooms today, that we've dedicated this expansive new building, that the youth have a place for them, that I know you would rather be downstairs than upstairs, and I get that, and I'm glad of that. But hang in there nevertheless. We wanted that for you, to dedicate that wonderful building. Wake Forest Baptist Church, best understood, you are a witness. That is, there's no way to explain this church if there was no God. You continue to stand at the very heart of this community as a sign for all to see that God is still very much alive, that there is a reason this church is here, and that God's hand is uniquely upon us. If I may pause in just a few personal thank yous, because life is not all work, although it seems that way sometimes. When I first came here, I left behind a family for a whole school year. And Jim and Gail Adams gave me their apartment. It was supposed to be for 9 months. It ended up being 18 months. The last 9 were a 9th grader and a dog and a cat and a wife all shared a 1-room apartment for 9 months. And I go back over there and I still get nostalgic sometimes. That's where it all began, those days. I want to say thank you. I'm a very private person. It's always been a struggle for me because I'm in a very public position. And when we went through a difficult time in our family, you honored my privacy. And when the celebrations came, you celebrated with me, and I'm thankful for both. I'll never forget those in this room who came, gave up a whole day to be there for my dad's funeral up above Richmond, Virginia. So thankful that last year you enthusiastically and quickly embraced the idea of giving me a sabbatical. I didn't realize how tired I was until I got away. And just not long after that, when our granddaughter, who's down in the nursery right now, was born, and you remember the story that she was whisked away by ambulance to 47 miles away, not knowing how her health would be, that the prayers went out in this church, and a day later, God transformed that whole thing. And of course, my ultimate, deepest thank you. Take her out of my story. There is no story. The secret to so much of my ministry is my wife, Kathy. All those times I was with you, I was not with her. All those interrupted vacations, all those times in the middle of the night. She has unimaginably, maybe more than should be, shared me with you. And I could not have possibly had the ministry I've had except for the support and teammate and best friend and love of my life as we celebrated 30 years. Love you. Then there's my two daughters. I'm really glad they're here today. They didn't get as much of their dad a lot of years as they should have. A lot of times I should have been with them that I wasn't. I have a big, big family. Sometimes it's hard to be faithful to both. And I regret sometimes the things that I was away where I should have been with you. But I'm very proud of you. Very much love you. I want to say thank you to those of you who joined this church since I've been here, over 700 people. You brought new energy. You brought an affirmation of this church. You brought unique spiritual gifts. And most of all, for me, you brought me a joy I have absolutely loved, especially I see the young couples. They've heard me say this so often. Come into this church, didn't know anybody, and within no time at all, some of your very best friends, and I've watched that. I thought, what a gift this church has given, just relationships and friendships with each other. But even more so, I have a unique thank you for those who were here when I came. You put your trust in a guy you didn't know at all. More than anything, you all were the ones who built the foundation for so much that our church has been able to experience these years. You've endured a lot of bad sermons and a lot of poor leadership. But more than anything, what amazes me about you all is that you've been open to change. There has been so much change in this church. It was needed, it's appropriate, but a lot of churches would not be willing to change the way you have. And I just am in awe of how you've embraced change that is the change God wanted for this church. In Vacation Bible School last month, it was asked the question, where do you see God? I always love the story of the minister who died and went to heaven. You know, not all of them do, but this one did. And the minister who died and went to heaven, and he finally saw the face of Jesus. And was surprised to see how much it looked like the face of his church members, so that he was moved to say, so it was you all along. I bet I'm going to have that experience. So it was you all along. I sit up here and you all think I'm counting noses, which I sometimes am. But I look out, and for me, I see the face of God. And I see the grace of God. What an undeserved gift you have given me. I have no illusions that any sermons I preach or programs we've offered or buildings or campuses we've opened will be the best stories. I don't think they'll be ultimately one day what I will remember, nor what God remembers. My sanctuary, yes, it is here. So much that is holy has taken place in this room. I come in here some weekdays, and I sit in the pew because you always sit in the same pews, and I pray for you as your pastor. I remember how much God loves me. I find my place with God. But just as much my sanctuary, the places where the holy has broken in for me has been sanctuaries in other rooms and other places where God was most visible to me. And I think that's what God remembers the most. I remember all night long in Rex Hospital with Ann Insco, with her devoted husband, Phil, on the other side, telling Ann it was okay. It was okay to go on. We were praying together all night long. And I hear God saying, that's what I remember too. I remember singing hymns and taking the Lord's Supper and laughing in the face of death in the den of Ryan and Jane Keith's house, where Jane absolutely refused to let death and cancer have the last word. And I hear God say, that's what I remember. And I remember so many hospital visits. I remember going to Duke Hospital. Little Hayden left, who was here just earlier, hardly 2 pounds. I remember I could hold her in my palm, and she is still with us today. I've spent so much time on the 5th floor at Duke Hospital with Derek Eisenhower, who was a witness for Christ. This past year, Caroline Britt, her 3-year-old journey, as a 3-year-old, a journey through health. And I hear God saying, that's what I remember. My life is so full. Who else gets the gift of being invited when the baby is born and holding that baby then later when when it's dedicated to God? Who else gets to stand in the baptismal waters? Who else gets to look in the face of the bride and groom? Who else gets the privilege of saying holy words over the empty grave? For 10 years, the most sacred moments of life, you have invited me to have a front row seat. I look at you, what we have done, we have shared stories. Gosh, I look around this room right now, some of the stories that we have shared. A funeral of a baby, not even full term. Of a teenage girl who would have changed the world, Joanne. Of senior adults who, for me, were larger than life. Young people now in the youth group who were wearing diapers when I first got here, sitting in countless waiting rooms, anxiously longing for some word from the doctor, listening to your stories of hurt and pain, and celebration and joy. A lot of life is lived in 10 years. And you have given me the gift of trust and acceptance. And your stories have made my story so much richer. April 16, 2013, I stood before a group of seminary trustees from all over the country. We were hoping against hope that maybe they would give us some land that we could build a new building on. All of our church's future hinged upon that meeting. The stakes could not have been higher. And for an hour and a half, they drilled me. They were so sure that I was something I was not. Finally, I was able to say to them, this is who Wake Forest Baptist is. This is what we value. This is what we claim. This is why we are here. This is what our highest loyalty is, to be builders of God's kingdom here in this little acre He's put us upon. And after all that, the primary antagonist in the room, he said to me, yeah, preacher, I think if I lived here, I'd like to be a part of that church. I was thinking, no, you wouldn't, but nevertheless. But I came out of there thinking, if I lived in this town and I didn't have to come to church because I get paid to do it, I would still want to come to this church because of every one of you. All this, it was God's idea before it was my idea. There are all kind of calls, yes. We get a call from a stockbroker for a tip. You may or may not have liked the referee's calls yesterday. The automakers are recalling their cars. But a little over 10 years ago, a call from a search committee chair that just changed everything for me. It's all still for me a mystery. But this much is not. God's calling on my life has been the one constant through it all. And I could not be more undeserving and more grateful for the call that brought me to Wake Forest Baptist Church. Someday, I know not when, the journey will end. And somebody, I don't know who, I have no pastor, will maybe throw out a few words over my ashes. And I hope he or she will just say, less of me, more of Christ. Less of me, more of Christ. All these years later, All I have is the story, but it's enough because it's everything. I love to tell the story, always remembering that it's his story more than it is ever mine. But better yet, just have somebody say, he was a nobody trying to tell everybody about somebody who's came to save anybody. 10 years. Kathy, who knows me better than anyone, how many times have I heard her say, Wake Forest Baptist Church is God's gift to Bill Slater? Indeed. And I thank you. And so our closing hymn this morning, I love to tell the story. Maybe my theme song, hymn number 572, if there are any this morning who wish to give their life to Christ, make some profession of faith, or unite with this church or another church family, you might tell by now, I think it's a great church. Or maybe some renewed commitment, I'll be at the front to receive you. Let us stand and sing to the glory of God, hymn number 572.
Good morning. For those that don't know me, I'm John Frank, and I'm chair of the Personnel Committee. She had to go back to work.
Okay. Yeah, Paige had to go to work.
Yeah. So, it's always a great opportunity when we get to recognize our staff. And, and as Bill talked a little bit about this morning, we're celebrating his 10-year anniversary today at Wake Forest Baptist Church. And he talked a little bit about his family. And, it's really a team effort. Ministers are on call 24/7. Their families have to support them just as much as they have to support them. And so, without a team, it doesn't work. And so, Bill's had a great team with his two daughters and Kathy, So, and on a personal note, I just want to say this, for the last 6 years, Bill has been a great partner and a great supporter on the missions program in this church, and I really just appreciate that, and I want to say that publicly. But on behalf of the Personnel Committee and your 10-year anniversary, we'd just like to present you with this small token of our appreciation. So, at this time, I'd like to recognize Gene Cross.
Good morning. My name is Gene Cross, and I've served as chair of the diaconate this year. I think more than anything, you don't know somebody until you really work with them in the trenches. And this year, I've worked in the trenches with Dr. Slater. We've been through several things together, and that always helps you know a person much, much better. The thing that I've learned about him is really threefold. First, Bill Slater loves the Lord. There is no doubt. He loves his family. He loves each one of you. And he loves this congregation in a way that he could love no others. He's very passionate about that, concern for each of you when maybe you don't think he does. He really does. And so today, all of these people know about the activities that we're going to do this afternoon. You didn't. So we had planned to do a little reception for you this afternoon from 3 to 5. No naps. Stay up all day. No visitation this afternoon. We want you to come, and these folks want to say a personal thank you for the things that you've done there. And when you see this afternoon and the way it unfolds, I think what you'll see is many of the spiritual gifts that folks have and the talents that they have demonstrated this afternoon and the love that they have for you. One of the things we want to do that we did not do in the 8:30 service, for those that maybe come to both services, we wanted to make a presentation as part of that prelude to this afternoon. This is really an example of someone who uses their talents to really in a spiritual way for others. And I think what you'll see in this particular piece is something that you'll want to treasure forever. And I want to talk about it just a second. One of our church members actually sat down and sketched this out, drew it out. And what's really nice is seeing that vision. That's what Bill sees when he looks out his window. You want to see it, don't you? What he sees out his window daily when he comes to work. But I think more importantly is what you might see on the back. So I'm going to get you to hold it for me. Okay. I think if you shared in the dedication a couple of weeks ago, you know and understand what that meant to Bill and to all of us here in the space that we now have to worship and educate many people, not only people that are here now, but future people. You can notice for everybody here on the back are the little ribbons, are the ribbons that were cut in the dedication ceremony. So what you may want to do is to hang it front ways first for a little while, and then after that, turn it back and look at that and ponder that. But I think it's a prime example of the talents that we have here at our church and the folks that are willing to use their talents, not only for people that are in our church now, but people in the future to come. So we look forward this afternoon to having each of you come and share in time. We'll have a reception for Bill from 3 to 5. Around 4 o'clock, or maybe a little bit before, we'll do some formal comments and we'll make some presentations there as well. So hope you can come out this afternoon to talk with Bill personally. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Just want to say, this is the one who gave me my granddaughter. So very special. This is Kelly and Kathy. So they deserve all the thank yous. So thank you. You don't have to give up football if you don't want to this afternoon, but I hope you will come out. That would be very nice. So let's go home. And I said in the early, I'll tell you what, how you all hold up? In the early service for our benediction, I'm so distracted. I could say this by heart, obviously, but so concerned that I wouldn't be able to get my act together. I have it written down. Well, I hope to see you Wednesday night, first of all. If you want to give me a gift, come out Wednesday night. That would be wonderful. And then those who joined today, Main Profession of Faith, come up. I hope you'll come up and welcome the newest family members. What I want to do for the benediction, y'all who have been around a while, join with me. We know the benediction. You've heard it by heart so many times. So let's say it together as our benediction, then stand to the glory of God. Thank you for being a part of this day. I'll never forget it. Thank you. So let's say together our wonderful benediction. Christ before you, Christ behind you, Christ within you. Grace upon grace, mercy upon mercy, love, all love. Jesus Christ our Lord. Thanks be to God. Amen.